You may have lost weight before, but strangely, your body still feels heavy, your energy remains low, and the fatigue never fully goes away. The problem may not be the number on the scale, but something you can't see: visceral fat. In nature, visceral fat isn't always harmful. For example, bears before winter store deep fat around vital organs like the liver and heart to survive hibernation. The key point is that this fat is temporary, and it's used at the right time for a clear biological purpose. Humans were once designed the same way. Visceral fat originally functioned as an evolutionary backup battery. But in the modern world, where food is always available, sugar is everywhere, and the body rarely gets real metabolic rest, this fat is no longer released. Instead, it stays too long, begins sending inflammatory signals, disrupts hormones, and makes the body operate inefficiently. When visceral fat finally starts to break down, the change isn't just about losing fat. The body shifts from survival mode into recovery. The liver becomes more efficient. Hormones communicate more clearly. Energy stabilizes. A quiet biological restructuring begins from the inside out. In this video, we'll explore what truly happens inside your body when visceral fat starts to dissolve, why this process has such a profound impact on long-term health, and how to activate it safely and scientifically. If you're interested in understanding your body through simple, practical science, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to join us for more content like this. And to understand why visceral fat has such a powerful impact, we first need to look at its true biological nature. Visceral fat is not simply excess energy stored deep inside the body. Biologically, it behaves like a miniature endocrine organ, constantly communicating with the brain, liver, pancreas, and immune system. The problem is that when this fat remains for too long, the signals it sends shift from supportive to disruptive. Unlike subcutaneous fat, the kind you can pinch, visceral fat sits close to vital organs. This location makes it highly sensitive to hormones and metabolic stress. When sugar intake is high, sleep is poor, or stress becomes chronic, visceral fat begins releasing inflammatory messengers. These signals reduce insulin sensitivity, making it harder for cells to absorb energy, forcing the body to produce more insulin just to maintain stable blood sugar. Over time, a silent loop forms. Blood sugar fluctuates, hunger hormones become distorted, energy levels turn unpredictable, and fatigue appears even without intense physical effort. What makes this especially concerning is how slowly it unfolds. Many people mistake it for aging or lack of motivation, when in reality, the body is operating under prolonged inflammatory pressure. This is why losing visceral fat is fundamentally different from traditional fat loss. It's not a battle of willpower or restriction. It's the process of removing a source of biological interference, allowing the body's systems to communicate clearly again. As visceral fat begins to break down, inflammatory signaling decreases, insulin functions more efficiently, and the body no longer has to strain to maintain short-term balance. At this stage, the most noticeable changes often aren't on the scale, but internally, energy becomes steadier. Hunger patterns grow more predictable, and the body starts responding positively to small adjustments. These are early signs that the metabolic system is moving out of overload and preparing to operate in a more stable, sustainable state. When inflammatory overload becomes recognized, the next question is clear. How does the body decide to unlock visceral fat first? The body doesn't burn fat randomly. Every move is driven by biological signaling. When fast energy sources like glucose begin to run low through fasting, reduced sugar intake, or simply longer gaps between meals, the body detects a safe energy shortage. Not a crisis, but a signal. It's time to activate the backup plan. This message is delivered quietly through hormones and cellular messengers. Insulin drops. Catecholamines rise slightly, And cortisol, when not hijacked by chronic stress, acts as a coordinator rather than a threat signal. When these cues align, the message becomes clear. Mobilize the most efficient, centrally located energy source, visceral fat. Visceral fat is prioritized not because it's weaker, but because it sits close to major blood vessels and critical organs. This allows energy to be released and distributed rapidly to the liver, heart, muscles, and brain. Subcutaneous fat, while more abundant, is biologically more distant and therefore accessed later. As visceral fat begins to break down, it doesn't disappear quietly. Free fatty acids are released into the bloodstream like urgent memos, informing organs that the energy strategy has changed. The liver receives the signal first. Muscles prepare to switch fuel sources. The pancreas adjusts insulin rhythm. A domino effect unfolds silent yet highly organized. What's remarkable is that this process doesn't require extreme restriction. It emerges when the right conditions are in place. Stable blood sugar, lower insulin levels, and manageable stress. In that environment, the body recognizes that holding on to visceral fat is no longer necessary for survival. At this stage, many people notice subtle but meaningful shifts. Hunger becomes less urgent. Longer gaps between meals feel comfortable. The constant pressure to eat fades. These are signs that the body has transitioned from fast energy dependence to a more flexible state where visceral fat fulfills its biological role, then gradually steps aside. Hormones are the body's internal language, and when visceral fat dominates, that language becomes distorted. Cortisol stays elevated like a constant alarm. Insulin must repeatedly intervene to keep blood sugar in check. Leptin tries to signal fullness, but the brain doesn't hear it. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, fluctuates unpredictably, triggering hunger even shortly after eating. As visceral fat begins to break down, this hormonal hierarchy gradually resets. Cortisol is often the first to respond. With inflammatory pressure easing, cortisol no longer needs to maintain high alert. The nervous system slows down. Many people begin sleeping more deeply, feeling less tense, and responding more calmly not through mindset changes, but because biological signals have softened. Insulin follows. As fatty acids are used more efficiently and blood sugar swings narrow, cells regain insulin sensitivity. This means the body needs less insulin to achieve the same effect. Blood sugar stabilizes. Sugar cravings decrease. Midday energy crashes become less frequent. Leptin, the satiety hormone, also regains its voice. Previously, visceral fat muted leptin signaling, leaving the brain unaware of fullness. As visceral fat recedes, this communication pathway clears. Fullness feels natural. Stopping becomes effortless. Control returns without force. On the opposite end, ghrelin becomes steadier. Hunger no longer strikes randomly. Eating rhythms normalize. And importantly, adiponectin, a hormone that supports fat burning and blood sugar regulation, begins to rise again. This silent ally had long been suppressed by visceral fat. Its return makes fat metabolism smoother and more efficient. What matters most is that these shifts don't happen in isolation. They work together like an orchestra being retuned. As hormonal communication sharpens, the body no longer needs to operate in survival mode. Instead, it enters a more intelligent, cooperative state, one that sets the stage for deeper improvements in the liver, gut, and immune system. Once hormonal communication begins to realign, the first organ to fully engage with this shift is the liver. The liver is the body's central energy processor. Every fatty acid released from visceral fat must pass through it first. Initially, this can feel like a surge. But instead of becoming overwhelmed, the liver adapts quietly, yet efficiently. As visceral fat breaks down, the liver receives a clear signal that the energy strategy has changed. Fat-burning enzymes are upregulated. Fatty acid oxidation becomes prioritized over glucose burning. At the same time, the liver begins producing ketones, clean, stable fuels that generate less inflammation than glucose. For many people, this is when energy starts to feel more sustained, with fewer crashes and less dependence on frequent meals. Importantly, this shift doesn't just improve fat burning, it allows the liver to restore itself. With reduced sugar load and lower insulin pressure, the liver no longer needs to store excess fat. This creates an opportunity for accumulated liver fat, the hallmark of fatty liver, to be mobilized and used. Liver enzyme levels often trend downward, and filtration capacity improves. In parallel, hormone processing becomes more efficient. Cortisol, estrogen, and testosterone hormones that previously circulated inefficiently in a disrupted metabolic environment are now cleared more smoothly. This contributes to improved emotional stability, sharper focus, and a noticeable sense of internal balance. At a deeper level, cellular changes are underway. Mitochondria, the cell's power plants, begin operating with higher efficiency. They generate more energy with less oxidative stress. This forms the biological foundation of metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch smoothly between burning glucose and fat depending on conditions. At this stage, the body no longer needs to sprint to maintain balance. The liver, once under heavy strain, becomes an anchor for a new metabolic equilibrium. And this stability sets the stage for broader improvements, extending beyond metabolism into immune function and the body's inflammatory environment. Once the liver stabilizes metabolic flow and inflammatory load decreases, a deeper shift unfolds. The immune system transitions from attack to repair. Visceral fat is not just an energy store. Over time, it acts as a silent inflammatory hotspot. Fat cells continuously release pro-inflammatory cytokines, keeping the immune system on prolonged alert. This isn't loud inflammation like an acute infection, but it's enough to erode blood vessels, disrupt hormones, and lock the body into a defensive state. As visceral fat melts away, this inflammatory flame begins to fade. Cytokine levels drop. Immune cells, especially macrophages, are no longer trapped in attack mode. They shift roles, from fighters to repair crews. Microscopic damage starts to heal. The internal environment becomes biologically quieter. This calm allows another system to recover, the gut microbiome. With lower inflammation and reduced toxic load, the gut becomes more hospitable to beneficial bacteria. Species like Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium gain ground. Beyond digestion, these microbes help produce neurotransmitters such as serotonin, directly influencing mood, sleep, and emotional balance. This is the gut-brain axis coming back online. When the gut signals safety, the brain lowers stress responses. The autonomic nervous system shifts from fight or flight toward rest and repair. Many people notice deeper sleep, steadier mood, and improved focus not due to mindset shifts, but because the biological foundation has changed. Another ripple effect is cellular cleanup. As visceral fat releases long-stored compounds, the liver, kidneys, and lymphatic system intensify detoxification. Temporary fatigue or mild brain fog can appear similar to spring cleaning, but once completed, the body feels lighter and more adaptable. The key takeaway is this. As inflammation cools and immunity recalibrates, the body doesn't just look leaner, it functions more intelligently. This sets the stage for the final phase, a stable, flexible metabolic state where the body no longer works against you, but begins working for you. When visceral fat begins to recede, the most profound change isn't your waistline or the number on the scale. What truly resets is your body's biological set point. The nervous system steps out of false alarm mode. Hormones stop talking over each other. The liver, gut, and brain begin working as a coordinated system rather than pulling the body in conflicting directions. At this stage, the body enters what science calls metabolic flexibility. You are no longer dependent on constant sugar for energy. When glucose is available, the body uses it. When it's not, it smoothly switches to burning fat, both visceral and subcutaneous, without panic or crashes. No constant hunger, no energy collapses, no reliance on sugar or caffeine just to function. This is why many people describe feeling lighter after losing visceral fat, but not just physically. Lighter mentally, lighter emotionally, lighter in digestion, not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because the body stops creating additional biological stress on top of it. It's important to understand that visceral fat doesn't disappear through punishment or extreme discipline. It melts when the body feels biologically safe. When blood sugar stabilizes, when stress hormones calm down, when sleep deepens, when the body is given space to repair instead of constantly defend. So the most practical advice isn't to eat drastically less or train brutally harder. It's to start with fundamentals that carry the greatest impact. Reducing refined sugar, creating reasonable metabolic breaks, prioritizing sleep, and respecting your natural biological rhythms. This isn't the fastest path, but it is the most sustainable one. Visceral fat may have been a silent saboteur. But once it retreats, your body doesn't just recover, it upgrades. And the most powerful truth is this: your body has always known how to do that. It was simply waiting for the right conditions. If this video helped you understand how deeply your body is designed to heal itself through simple, science-based principles, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Understanding your body is the first step toward long-term health, and we're here to walk that path with you.